Certain individuals have qualities of courage that guide and inspire others to move in the direction of something better. Some may even make sacrifices in the face of oppression. Oscar Rivera Lopez is a reflection of this capability to organize against and take a stand for a more just world, doing so in a manner that has resulted in a legacy.
Drafted into the Army, Oscar was rewarded with the Bronze Star in Valor. Both symbolize the courage he put forth into the war.
I think it's hard enough to explain to the general population what Oscar's sentence is about and why he is in prison.
The small island has been under another country's power for 200 years. First Spain, then after the Spanish-American War, the United States. For more than a century, there have been Puerto Ricans fighting for independence.
Oscar Lopez Rivera, even though I have not met him personally, he has influenced many people throughout the years, from before he went to prison to these days now in prison as well. He continues to make a name for himself, and we have many of the organizations here in the community. I am part of one of those organizations, and I work at Rincon Family Services, where Oscar had an important role in forming that organization, as well as Dr. Pedro Albizu Campos and many other places in the community that people can take advantage of, not only in education, but in many other ways. Oscar, being in prison for 33 years, he has continued to move people and gives people passion to continue working for the people in the community, not only for Puerto Ricans in the community, but for other Latinos and other African Americans and people of all races.
Oscar Lopez Rivera was arrested on May 28, 1981, under false accusations of seditious conspiracy and participation in Flan. Oscar Lopez Rivera was a Puerto Rican nationalist and activist, fighting tirelessly for the independence of Puerto Rico.
He's a reputed terrorist, a man convicted of leading an underground war on America.
Oscar Lopez Rivera,
The leader of the FALN.
underground bomber who committed acts of violence for an idea, Puerto Rican nationalism.
I do not condone violence for the sake of violence.
Oscar Lopez is a planner. He's an organizer. He is a bomb maker. He does perpetrate terrorist acts himself.
4 bombs went off at police headquarters and federal buildings in the city.
The FALN has claimed responsibility for the explosions, and Police Commissioner Robert McGuire says
the FALN terrorist group were arrested
3
Friday as the
policemen were
United
seriously
Nations.
injured in those explosions.
After his arrest, the case of Oscar Lopez Rivera became a federal case. After his trial, Oscar was sentenced to 55 years in prison, where he remains today.
In the U.S., the concept of seditious conspiracy was then used against the government of the Confederacy. So we see that it was used as a way to not deal with not having to prove someone had committed treason, but obviously something in between. The concept of seditious conspiracy has to be put in the historical context of a use of a legal structure that goes back to almost the beginning of the founding of the United States. Whenever 2 or more gather and conspire to overthrow the legitimate authority of the U.S. government through force and violence.
Proven evidence of Oscar Rivera Lopez being in possession of weapons has been used against him.
Seditious conspiracy itself has a maximum of 20 years, and that is, of course, what he was given on that charge. But what they did was they charged him, as they did the others as well, with other offenses like possession of unregistered firearms, transporting stolen cars across state lines. And each of those offenses carries X number of years. It could be 10 years, it could be 5 years. And what the government did, because all of the other offenses they were charged with were included under the rubric of seditious conspiracy, they were able to get far more than 20 years. They were able to pyramid or stack the charges to add up each of the sentences for each of the specific offenses and get to the astronomical level of 55 years.
Bill Clinton offered Oscar Rivera Lopez and others a pardon in the year 1999 because despite being found with weapons, Oscar had not caused any bodily harm to anyone.
They had served very long sentences for offenses that did not involve bodily harm to other people.
Oscar Rivera Lopez reflects a sense of standing up for what you believe in, and this has been portrayed through his sentence of 33 years in which he has endured various forms of harsh conditions and punishments.
So currently we are in the home stretch for Oscar's campaign. So right now we're working diligently on getting 100,000 signatures to send to Obama so Obama can free him before he runs out of office. So we're trying to do online petitions, just petitions in the community, petitions in the diaspora and in Puerto Rico itself to see how many we can get so Oscar can be free. There's also some events, so educational events, open mics, just community things that we're doing, but mostly it's about the petition. So some hardship we face is the opposition to Oscar's campaign. So there are some people who want to keep him in prison, who believe he's a terrorist. And definitely when we're out in the street, there are some people who have heard things passed down from generations of people who were around in the community when Oscar was out of prison, and people who have said like some things like Oscar's a terrorist. When we approach them on the street, they definitely are not in support for Oscar. So the hardship we face is just people who want to keep him in prison very strongly. The word terrorist has changed since 9/11, so you think of terrorist, you think of someone who's murdered people and caused harm to a large population, and Oscar has not been charged with any violent crimes. He's never shed one drop of blood. So calling him a terrorist has been really problematic to the campaign because we're trying to frame his campaign in a human rights aspect. So he's a 71-year-old man who hasn't been able to experience a lot of things in his family because he's been in prison. So there are people who truly believe Oscar is a terrorist. They've read this information online or have been told by someone in opposition. The word terrorist has really morphed into something different after 9/11. So when you think of the word terrorist, you think of someone who has caused harm to someone, who has killed hundreds of people, and Oscar has never been charged with a violent crime. He's never been charged for dropping 1 ounce of blood. He has been falsely charged with these allegations from the opposition. So dealing with people who truly believe he should stay in prison and believe he's a violent man when in reality he's over 70 years old, a grandfather, a father, a family member who has seen deaths in his family and not been able to console his family and be with his siblings through hard times. He's just a gentleman who has done a lot for his community and has really contributed in a large way to the diaspora and to Puerto Rico. In the Humboldt Park community, Oscar has been really involved in the foundation and the birth of organizations that have lasted over 40 years. So he was part of the founding of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, which is the place where I work, the Puerto Rican High School, Albizu Campos, and a lot of other community organizations in Humboldt Park and around the area at the University of Illinois Chicago, like GLADES. He's left a foundation and a legacy that has gotten people like myself involved. So without Oscar putting all that hard work back in the day, I would have never been able to find a space like the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, deal with my identity as a Puerto Rican woman, and figure out that I wanted to dedicate my life to my people, to my community. So Oscar's left a legacy that has enabled hundreds of people to get involved in something larger than them.
Oscar Rivera Lopez has left a legacy so deeply rooted within communities and people who to this day fight for the end of his enjailment of 33 years. He has shown his leadership skills by having all of these accusations against him, yet believing so strongly in his cause that he chose in 1999 to stay in jail. There are high hopes among the Puerto Rican community that Mr. Rivera will one day see the other side of the jail walls.